Welcome to Unjourneying, a podcast about psychedelics, healing, awakening, non-duality, and more. I'm your host, Mira Funk, licensed clinical social worker. I am a psychotherapist and psychedelic guide. And today I'm honored to present my very first guest. His name is Wystan Bryant-Scott. And Wystan is a highly respected and accomplished meditation teacher who is trained eclectically in multiple lineages, including the Zen traditions of Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village, Cliff Monastery, and Zen Mountain Monastery, as well as the Thai forest tradition of Ajahn Chah. He has also completed Shinzen Young's Unified Mindfulness Teacher Training and has been authorized to teach the Jhanas by Leigh Brasington. Wystan's interests span philosophy of mind, neuroscience, contemplative phenomenology, meditation research, and psychedelics. Through teaching, writing, and hosting conversations, Wystan seeks to make the benefits of dedicated contemplative practice more widely accessible while remaining committed to lifelong training, inquiry, and service. So, having told you a little bit about Wystan, I am very excited to present this conversation. I thought a lot about who I wanted to have as my first guest. For the first few episodes, I wanted to just do them solo, just to establish a kind of content foundation for the podcast. And then, I went through a lot of different possibilities, and I finally landed on Wystan. I think he's a perfect person to talk to just because he has so many eclectic interests, and he's so well respected in so many of the communities that I'm part of in terms of meditation, in terms of psychedelics, awakening, and a community that we'll refer to as Teapot in the podcast. In case you haven't heard about that, Teapot stands for this part of Twitter. And it's just a sort of subculture within Twitter that focuses a lot on awakening and psychedelics and non-duality and somatics and emotional well-being and so forth. And I wouldn't say I'm an active part of Teapot, but I certainly follow it pretty avidly. And Wystan's certainly an active member. And so, I've become aware of his work through that community. And I feel like, he just would be, I knew he would be the perfect person because he's so knowledgeable and experienced. And he's also just like really down to earth, easy to talk to, has a great sense of humor. And I knew he would set a great tone and precedent for a future conversation. So, the conversation is really exciting and wide-ranging. We talk about jhanas, we talk about psychedelics, we talk about Tantra and sexual practices during non-duality. So I think there's going to be a lot of content here, a lot of interesting topics for everybody. Look forward to presenting it to you. So without further ado, I will present to you this conversation with Wystan Bryant-Scott. All right, so Wystan, welcome to Unjourneying. I'm honored and delighted to have you here. You are my first official guest, and I think you're a perfect guest to have. I thought for a really long time about who I wanted and went through a bunch of different possibilities, and I really solidly landed on you. I just feel like, you're just such a, you're so knowledgeable and so experienced, and also just so down to earth and easy to talk to. And I just feel like, I don't know, I just know a lot of people are going to benefit from what you have to share. So I'm just happy to host you here. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Mira.
Yeah, so catch us up on what you've been up to. I know you were, I think, part of the Nameless Mountain community that's forming. Is that right? I think you were there recently.
Yeah, I was just in Colorado for a couple of weeks. Gabe and I, we did a couple day backpacking, mixing backpacking and meditation in the mountains, which is a wonderful excuse to go hiking and meditate, which are two of my favorite things.
I noticed in your videos, they always start with a scene of nature, which I think it's so Dzogchen. I was just going through your YouTube catalog to prepare for this, and it's always the sky, and then it comes in and there you are. So you have that nice interplay of nature and meditation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a subtle nod. Yeah, often I'll angle the camera up, and then because I often I could record in a building or a room, but if I can go for a walk and find a nice place, it's nicer for me. Gives some nice scenery.
So for folks who may not be familiar with Gabe, this is also known as Vivid Void, who I guess, I don't know him very well except through Twitter, and I kind of understand him to be he's sort of like a prominent figure, I feel like, within the sort of Teapot kind of community of sort of online Dharma and what else would you say? Sort of like somatic practices and mental health, wellness, things like that. So yeah, I'm just curious, kind of like how
mix
you
of spirituality, psychology, psychedelia, tech.
Right. Yeah.
That odd cluster that is Teapot. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that how you guys got connected through
Twitter? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And I saw you're on the board of trustees, I think. So you're going to play a pretty active role, it sounds like, in shaping that community. That's cool. Yeah.
Hopefully so. I mean, it's still very, very fledgling, and I'm on the board.
Yeah. Awesome. I saw Gabe has some sort of programming lined up around sort of like men's issues and masculinity, and it sounds like some interesting retreats there with like wrestling and building lodges and stuff like that, which makes a lot of sense given his background in martial arts and the Marines and so forth.
Marines and also doing construction and art projects and stuff. And I mean, there's we were talking the other day, all of these retreats about embodiment and getting in contact with your physical sensations. What's really good for that? Manual labor, building something, working with tools.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Zen work practice, right? Like I feel like that's when I used to, on Zen retreats, notice my mind spacing out more than anything, was like when I'd be trying to do manual labor and my mind would be, so it definitely really helps get you in your body. And I saw that you are starting to do some programming there. And I think your first retreat is like a Jhanas retreat. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So November 6th through 15th, later this year, I'll be teaching mainly on Jhana, but kind of the focus will be Jhana. And I assume that will be the main draw, people who want to dive in and explore that territory. But as I said in the announcement, I'll also be trying to cover really as much of the path as I can within that short 10 days. So including Satipatthana, Brahmavihara, and also the non-dual destination.
So awesome. Okay. So it's going to be pretty eclectic, it sounds like.
As reflects me. It was pretty
yeah, I was going to say, that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, is because I feel like you are someone who's just like absorbed just so much from so many different traditions and made your own kind of eclectic way. And I think a lot of people can relate to that in our kind of, so-called like meta-modern era. People, Dharma is for most people kind of a pastiche, I think, of many different influences. And I think that you embody that. So I think,
for better and worse.
Yeah. Well, anytime we hear jhanas, I think it raises all sorts of questions, that I think listeners may have around like, well, what kind of jhanas are these? The Sutta jhanas or the Visuddhimagga jhanas? So I'm curious, like, what sort of tack you take through that complex territory that people often, fight over in terms of what constitutes a legitimate jhana and so forth.
Yeah, well, I don't think we need to fight, but it is good to be clear about what we're talking about, because even within, kind of orthodox, more orthodox lineages of, say, Theravada, or people influenced by the suttas, there are different streams of interpretation and practice that are leading to radically, in some cases, quite radically different states. So what I have mainly practiced, and certainly what I'll be teaching on the retreat, and mainly what I offer folks, is jhana practice, which is in accord with what I understand from my own reading and looking at the scholarship, et cetera, from the early suttas. But my primary teacher in that arena has been Leigh Brasington. Also been influenced by Rob Rebea and some other folks who are kind of teaching in the same, tranche of like jhana depth and absorption. And then, I'm definitely not teaching jhana as you'll find in the Visuddhimagga. That's awesome, and that's cool, and that's real, and those are radically different states. And if you want to go off on long retreat and experience those, recommended, very cool. But not what I'm teaching, and probably not accessible to most folks in 10 days.
Yeah, it sounds like from everything I've read, you really have to commit yourself for maybe as long as a month or more, and doing like many hours a day. I mean, for some people, obviously, people have different levels of variable facility. I was reading, I think you had a blog post where you talked about some of the Payok, and getting into some, even like, I think you described first jhana and that tradition as being, analogous to some kind of like 5-MeO deep dose experience, which is really so different, on the spectrum from what Leigh Brasington's talking about, which is just fascinating. Yeah, that both of those could be called first jhana.
Yeah,
I know that Kenneth Folk used to talk about it's like, well, it's it's first jhana because it's like strawberry flavoring. It can be very dilute, it can be very concentrated, but it still tastes the same in some level. I don't know if you find that to be true or not, but
yeah. Well, I don't have that much experience with Pa'ak and Jhana. Like I really only stabilized the first in that system.
Yeah.
So, but based on that limited experience, yeah, it noticeably has the same kind of qualities, if kind of purified, refined. Like there's something in the frequency domain of the feeling experience that is, yeah, okay, that it has those qualities. Even if the body is completely gone, there's no thought. Your sense of ordinary space and time, it's just knocked out. Yeah, bonkers.
Yeah. I think another question that I find comes up a lot with jhanas that I see people asking online, I'd be curious to get your take about this, is sort of the utility of jhanas along the path. Obviously, there's many different approaches all the way from one end of the spectrum of the dry insight worker who has no jhanas, versus other approaches that are saying, yeah, like really the jhanas are sort of like almost like a lubricant or some kind of necessary aid to getting into deeper vipassana for insight. And then I think the other thing, so there's sort of this, I guess this is sort of a two-part question of like the role of jhana to realization, you could say, or to some kind of awakening. And then the other question is, part two is like the role of jhana after awakening, because I've seen some people say like, well, once I'm sort of just resting as awareness, doing my trekjo practice, I don't have any interest in the jhanas. But then other people seem to sort of say like, oh no, it's still useful to dip back in. So anyway, I'm just sort of curious to get your thoughts, like along the path, the way to awakening, after awakening, where do the jhanas fit in? How do you see that?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look to the suttas, not that, the suttas are the be all and end all, not, if something's in the Pali Canon, that doesn't mean it's the truest and the best. I don't believe that. But jhana is mentioned more often than any other kind of meditation practice, as far as I'm aware. So certainly, in the early Buddhist path to awakening and indeed post-awakening cultivation, I mean, the Buddha continued to practice, the Sangha continued to practice, Arahant disciples continued to practice jhana all their life long, right? And in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the last thing that the Buddha does before he totally unbinds is run up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or no, there's also Nirodha Samapati in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
Then
and I always had it weird, like, why did he stop at 4? Like, it's sort of a funny question. Like, why not go up to another Nirodha Samapati before death? I don't know. Did he just kind of like run out of steam, or was it very intentional? I don't know.
Unclear. This is left as an exercise for the reader.
Right. Yeah.
But from personal experience and folks I know, jhana, or really any kind of deep absorptive, stable samadhi, right? The two wings of a bird, shamatha and vipassana. If you've just got one wing flapping, it's not going to be, that bird isn't going to fly so well. And doing vipassana, right, in all of the various modes that will show up in, you will, of necessity, if you're getting some depth there, be also developing shamatha. And there are some methods and ways of practice that are more of a yoked approach. But, certain methods lean more to one side or another. And jhana is certainly more on the shamatha end. But it's rare. It's quite rare in my experience for someone to have certainly an abiding awakening without some prior depth and continuity and cultivation of samadhi. And jhana is just a really wonderful, enjoyable, expedient means for that. And the process of training the mind to the point where you have some facility, fluency, and mastery with certainly the first 4, if not beyond. You have to go through a lot to get to that point. Most people will. Working through whatever knots and brambles and resistances are in your system to energizing and settling and stabilizing the mind in that progressive process. That then also from the platform of the 4th or beyond, or even earlier ones. But, canonically, and this accords with my own experience, folks I know, the 4th or beyond is really an ideal platform to take on any practice,
Mm-hmm.
whether insight or otherwise.
So including death, apparently, for the Buddha.
Including death, right.
That's why. The fourth, yeah. And that's, if I remember correctly, supposedly on the night of his awakening, and to the fourth jhana was where he kind of had all the insights into sort of the past lives and so forth. And,
it's also
and
the basis
dependent
for
origination. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's definitely something. I've sort of just for fun undertaken recently the project of trying to read as much of the early suttas as I can, and I was astonished to find, because I think a lot of times people associate like really hardcore jhana practice with more of the Visuddhimagga, or more of like contemporary like Daniel Ingram kind of stuff. And it's like, no, it's all right there in the suttas, like quite extensively, quite repetitively, with that sort of oral technology of everything repeated, where it's like, yeah, there's so much emphasis on jhanas. And the fourth seems to be very much emphasized, I feel like, for some reason above others. And then I feel like the cessation of perception and feeling also tends to get a very like elevated role in my reading in many places, including one sutta where it says, nibbana in this life is equated to cessation of perception and feeling, which is interesting. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, there are variant readings. The cessation of perception and feeling certainly, as far as I'm aware, this is true today as it was in the time of the Buddha. As far as temporary states that one can attain in life go, that's kind of it. That's the peak. That's the pinnacle. And certainly, cessation, whether temporary or extended, in my own practice, and can be among the most catalytic for insight. Though I occasionally want to push back in some contemporary discourse, even in some relatively orthodox Theravada that seems to fetishize cessation experiences, momentary or prolonged, as being one, nibbana itself. I disagree with that reading. I don't think the cessation of perception and feeling equals nibbana in a straightforward way, or that it's necessary to awakening. I absolutely, worth doing, worth attaining, catalytic for insight for sure. But I don't think it straightforwardly equates to nibbana, nor is it strictly necessary.
All right, I love getting this perspective because, this is definitely different than, surprised people disagree about these things, and they have ever since the time of the Buddha. My understanding is, after the Buddha died, there were as many as like 18 different schools that developed different interpretations. So there's always been lots of controversy about the Dharma, but yeah, this is great to hear. I'm curious to hear more because, I know that I have heard people, including, I don't know, I think like Daniel Ingram, certainly Michael Taft. I think once there was an interview they did where they were both saying that, sort of upholding a cessation as the kind of gateway to awakening, that is something that kind of is non-negotiable. And even to the extent, if I remember correctly, Daniel Ingram saying, if you had an awakening, there was a cessation. Maybe you didn't notice it because it was very momentary, but it had to be there. Almost the sense of like, this is a neurological requirement, and if it doesn't happen, and I kind of like, I remember when I first heard that, I was very skeptical. I don't like maps that are very rigid, and that sort of say it has to be this way. And then that was before I had my own cessation, and then after I had a cessation, something really shifted, and so I was kind of like, well, maybe it is necessary. I'm not sure. But it did seem to do something big. But it sounds like you're saying, not necessarily. Like certainly it's catalytic, but there can be many different ways, up the mountain, so to speak.
Yeah, and as examples in the Zen and Dzogchen traditions, right? Whether you're working on a koan or you receive pointing out instructions, or you're doing some other practice and you have an awakening experience. Sometimes in the Zen tradition, this has happened for me, and I know this is true for some other Zen folks I know. Sometimes at the moment of the resolution of a koan, there will be a cessation, and that is as transformative as cessations can tend to be. But sometimes not. Sometimes not at all. And definitely in a Dzogchen context, cessation is, sure, that can happen, but it's not. You're not vectoring towards it.
Fetishized that way. Yeah. I'm realizing it suddenly came to my mind that I'm still curious about the second part of this jhana question, which is because we went off on this delicious rabbit trail with the canonical, but sort of like, I think some folks are curious about after awakening, let's say, has been stabilized in some kind of, let's just say, Dzogchen sort of sense where you're sort of having this persistent, stabilized sense of, subject and object sort of collapsing into this sort of unitary experience of awareness. Our jhanas, yeah, it's a thing. Yeah, it's real. It doesn't solve all your problems, but it definitely provides a different context for everything, I think. Do you think jhana, because I've heard some people say, well, after you kind of get to that point, then jhana feels kind of, uninteresting or just superfluous, or people just say, that's just not what I'm doing anymore. I'm just resting as awareness. I don't do jhana practice. What's your opinion? Is jhana still useful after awakening? Does it kind of fall by the wayside? Yeah.
I think it's certainly still useful. That's been my experience. And I also understand why people would lose interest at various points, right? I mean, yeah, you can enter these profoundly blissful, peaceful, spacious, absorbed states. And after you have done that a whole bunch, even prior to awaken, you might reach a point of satiation where it's just like, yeah, okay, but
yeah,
like
so
light,
what?
form, color, what, like,
yeah.
So what? And like some form of continuous cultivation post awakening really, I would say is necessary to more fully integrate and see clearly and continue the kind of shedding of habituation.
Yeah.
Both pre and post. Jhana or I really enjoy Vajrayana Deity Yoga and mantra and all kinds of stuff. I'm equal opportunity samadhi enjoyer.
Again, the eclecticism. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, it's interesting. I think probably the most extreme example I've heard of somebody, I was reading something from Roger Thisdale saying that he felt that after sort of getting to, at the time he was calling it fourth path. I think he's kind of said that he doesn't like using that language as much anymore, but he felt that in a way that jhanas were almost inaccessible to him. Like his mind did no longer wanted to sort of shift gears in that kind of hard way, because his mind had just become so used to just the thisness, just the tathata, just the openness. And it felt very sort of like strange to do that. And so that's sort of an interesting sort of data point. So I feel like there's lots of different places on the map where people are saying, yeah, you can still dip into them. I mean, obviously, like someone like Stephen Snyder, is like teaching jhanas also, for all we can tell, like a very awakened person who can enter into cessation and, has stabilized kind of non-dual abiding. And then, yeah, so there's like that. And then there's people saying, I'm not interested. Then there's people saying like, I can't do them now, or they don't feel, so it's fascinating. And I think, yeah, I guess, again, the principle of just eclecticism applies here, and equal opportunity, like you're saying. It's not that there's one way. It's just that these are a lot of different tools, and we just kind of see what's useful to people's nervous systems, right?
Yeah,
and to their path.
I mean, and I also, knowing a little bit more about Roger's story there, he can jhana again, but for I think it was several months.
Okay.
His mind just didn't want to contract or like squeeze in the way that you need to kind of energize. And mix. Yeah, sure.
Oh, so that's also very interesting. So there's almost like a longitudinal sense of like maybe there's short-term windows where some of these things are accessible or inaccessible, and looking at the longitudinal, that might change. Yeah,
and after big shifts, like differences in functioning or the accessibility of certain states or the inaccessibility of certain states seems variable across people I know. And at various shifts I've undergone, things have gotten weird. Another thing that people will often remark is memory changes. And my after the biggest shift I experienced, my short-term memory was shot for weeks, but it came back just fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah. So while we're talking about eclecticism, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a recent podcast I listened to you, maybe it was the Michael Taft one interview. You said that you identify as a religious Buddhist. Is that accurate?
Yeah. That's true.
And I love that. It's very refreshing to hear someone say that, because I think, again, in this sort of teapot, meta modern, Keegan levels world that so many people in this Dharma scene inhabit, I think there can be a certain kind of hesitancy or almost allergy to feeling like, oh, I can't sort of like pitch my tent somewhere in particular and say that I'm like religious. I like that you can boldly do that. And I'm curious to hear more about sort of what that means to you to identify that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's descriptive of my activities, how I live my life, the way I orient myself moment to moment, or at least how I try to. And like etymologically, I quite like this religio. It's something that binds. It's something that it's a structure.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. In a way, it has the same sort of etymology as like yoga. I mean, not the same root, obviously, but just in terms of meaning of a sense of binding together. That's fascinating. Yeah, like a ligation. Yeah, and that's part exactly. Of you. I think your father's like a pastor, right, or a theologian of some kind.
Yeah, so I grew up in the religious kind of. I grew up in the religious life, and with a religious professional as a father, and in that. So that the religious aspects, or kind of the religious atmosphere of more traditional Buddhist settings, felt very much in a different mold, different forms, but very much like home. I grew up,
see that.
In and around churches. I feel comfortable identifying and expressing religiously within a Buddhist context and frame, while also feeling comfortable affirming that the awakening that the Buddha realized that is available to folks now, like I think I said in the Taft interview, it doesn't come with a Buddhist label. Like, there's this is what these are the expressions, this is the language, these are the methods that have worked for me, that make the most sense to me, that fit together conceptually in a way that satisfies my my intellect. It all fits. It all works together. Even with my absurd eclecticism within the Buddhist tradition, at this point, I've spent most of the past decade pretty obsessively within this atmosphere. I'm holding a vajra right now, fidgeting with it. This is.
Oh, there you go. I love that. The Dharma fidget toy.
yeah, that's what it's for.
Well, it makes sense.
Does that give some color? Context?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we're kind of parsing out the difference between, I think sometimes because people are so hesitant to identify in any particular way, I think in the particular teapot sort of subculture that we're describing here, it's I think some people hear religious and maybe their mind jumps to to more sort of like fundamentalist or orthodox or something like that. And I like how you're holding that tension between, like I'm serious and committed enough about this path that I can describe. You can describe your devotion as religious and yet still maintain an openness and to just like the way the Dharma shows up in different ways. And it's not like owned by Buddhism per se. The path. Yeah.
No, I mean, my interpretation is the only correct one out of all of the different Buddhist ones, and only Buddhism has a monopoly on truth. Everybody else is doing it wrong, and I'm going to tell them so.
Yeah. See, this is why I wanted to invite you on, because I knew you would you would tell us how it is and lay down the law. That's what we need.
I do have opinions. I do get cranky and express them sometimes. But
let's talk about that, because when we were emailing back and forth about bouncing different ideas around to talk about, you mentioned the word renunciation, and you were talking about maybe I'll just put the ball in your court. Like what do you mean by renunciation, and what sort of salty feelings perhaps have you been having around that topic lately?
Well, a frequent enough experience in my own life, working in my own practice, and then also a struggle I see a lot of people having is attempting to apply traditional Buddhist methods and integrate different parts of a Buddhist worldview, and in a piecemeal, often not that well informed way, in the scope and context of the original tradition. And it's like they're taking parts of a cart. They found parts of a cart in a marketplace, and they're like, "Oh, this seems like a good vehicle. I'd like to, move along in it and get to where I want to go. I'll just take a couple of parts from the marketplace. I don't really know how this fits together, and I don't have a blueprint of what it's supposed to look like. Try to fit it together, and then they try to ride in a cart that has like one wheel and a bed that's not quite aligned properly, and it's clunky and it's not very comfortable, and it doesn't go very fast. And they're like, "What's wrong? Carts are bullshit."
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So all elements, there's nothing extraneous or accessory. Nothing that might be too strong, but all of the elements that you'll find in traditional forms of any religion, not just Buddha Dharma, ideally they have lasted this long because they work in a kind of harmonious, coherent whole to shape life and practice and experience and move you towards greater freedom, devotion, whatever the explicit goals are. And one thing that in a Buddhist context, most people, especially, we lay people, monastics also struggle with this, is the extent to which the path and the kind of honestly quite radical engagement that it requires to move along it in an expedient manner in the way described in classic texts, right? Requires giving a lot of things up, just in terms of time, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And also people, and speaking from my own experience, I've often found myself at cross purposes, being like, well, to what extent am I just using Buddhist methods, faithfully applied, trying to kind of ameliorate the suffering of my, contemporary modern lay lifestyle in a way that's just kind of abandoned. If you're not actually making changes to the daily habits, the way you live, the way you conduct your relationships, work, how you're connected with everything else, is this just a kind of palliative that's not addressing root causes, which have which are more difficult to confront than just adding in some practice to everything else you're doing without making bigger changes.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that really clarifies things. And I think, again, sort of distinguishing the language here and parsing this out, because, I think a lot of people hear the word renunciation and their mind maybe will jump to canonical kind of Orthodox Buddhism, where it's like, okay, let's do, like practices where we're focusing on how disgusting, the process of eating and digestion is. Because we don't want to get attached to the pleasure of food, or let's instead of doing an MBSR style body scan, let's do a body scan where we're focusing on like the mucus and the phlegm. This is all in the suttas, as I'm sure like focusing on just how disgusting like bodily fluids are, and all of this is sort of leading to a kind of world renouncing, renunciate practice of giving up sense pleasures. The Buddha was famously opposed to listening to music or dancing or things like that, because these all kind of increase clinging to the world when we're supposed to be moving towards, nibbana, in the sense of the classical sense of, or you could say parinibbana of not being reborn, like not entering a womb again, as it said in the suttas. Yeah. That is not the renunciation you're talking about. This is more of, I don't know if you would identify it this way, but I feel like this is almost like a Buddhist modernist, perhaps like reconfiguration of renunciation, where it's no longer about world denying. Like there is a sort of, as David McMahon would talk about, this kind of world affirmation frame here, but it sounds like you could almost frame it as a level of commitment. That it's like people are, in your opinion, maybe in some cases trying to keep all the elements of their life as it is, and then adding in just a little sprinkling of Dharma. And in your opinion, like that doesn't lead to coherent results. And renunciation in this case means to you, it sounds like Yeah, like really making some more radical changes, more than anything else, like you said, in terms of time, like the dedication. Am I picking up what you're saying there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is an ongoing discernment, and I'm not a Theravadan, right? If I'm anywhere in the Buddhist landscape, I'm more in the Tantric Dzogchen, with some Zen sprinkling these days. So
Yeah.
I don't. I'm not going to deny myself all opportunity for sense pleasure, nor do I necessarily encourage other people to do that. If they want to for a period of time, like more strict renunciation can be actually really helpful. It certainly has been for me. Like on that traditional
Sure.
mold.
Yeah, especially in the retreat context, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not trying to escape and get somewhere else. I don't think that the kind of Buddhism that I practice, that's not what we're doing here.
Right. Yeah. So,
but certainly a radically transformed relationship to sensory experience. That's absolutely
yes.
that is what we're going for, and that involves some amount of seeing clearly what your mind is doing from moment to moment as it configures your life and your habits, and discerning honestly for yourself moment to moment, day after day, week after week, month after month. Is this habit? Is this practice? Is it in line? Is it actually leading me to where I want to go? Or is this kind of just dragging me, holding me back? Is this slowing me down? Or is this at cross purposes with what is my deepest, most authentic desire, which for me is awakening as fully as I can and being as much benefit as I can in this life, right? And for some people, that's going to look different for different people as well. I don't think that looks one way. For some people, it is the best thing for them to ordain and to be a classic, renunciate. That's great. And for some, it's not going to look like that at all.
Yeah.
But that honest exploration that will probably be uncomfortable, I think, is necessary.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, since you named tantric practices and sensuality, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't segue into another topic that you brought up in our email exchange, which is sexual energy. You probably could see where I was going with this. Sexual energy, tantric methods. So I'm curious, and I'm sure a lot of people will have their curiosity piqued by how you are approaching those kind of practices.
Yeah, well, when initially I got interested in all of this, and seeing what was out there, I was like, there's tantra, there's California tantra, neo tantra, which
right, which comes from Osho, right? I think.
Oh, it's an eclectic, like I'm not a scholar of contemporary tantra or neo tantra, so I couldn't honestly say. But what's interesting to me in those methods and that approach is not necessarily sex, although sex is great, but the way in which working with appearances, working with desire without fixation, whether that's enjoying delicious food or hearing music, the tantric ethos and appreciation of all sound as mantra, as all appearance as the face of Buddha, as one's own body, as the deity, as every being that you encounter, as expressions of the sacred, right? And of course, naturally, sex is included in that, and there are classical techniques that are not often taught anymore because it gets messy for all kinds of reasons. But having gone through more traditionally renunciate phases where I really have tried my best to cut myself off from the sensual. Like catching the slightest little micro movements of craving in regard to like porridge in a monastic environment, and going like, no, let that go. No.
I'm assuming this was like rice porridge, like like kanji
or
or juk, that kind of thing. Yeah, they used to serve us that when I was at the Korean monastery Musangsa during my own brief dabble in monasticism. That was our breakfast every morning, was the juk, and oh yeah, it was delicious. And they would have us put peanut butter with it too, which is, I thought, really interesting. I'm assuming that was a convert addition.
I think so.
Yeah, they would get like jars of peanut butter from the local Costco and mix it in. It's great. Anyway, yeah, it's obviously still coming to mind because yeah, when you're in that kind of renunciate environment, those sensory desires can be very strong and overwhelming. And I think what you're saying is there's an interesting practice in. It's not like you're cutting off the craving in some kind of classical canonical sense, but more noticing it and then allowing it to flow through you like energy, so it doesn't become something that your mind is like fixated upon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So whether with sexual energy or with craving for food, or there's a beautiful sight, or there's some aesthetic delight that's occurring within your field of experience, you're an embodied being. You're going to have, there might be some reaction to it. And rather than just letting it kind of die in place, or, redirect your attention so that energy doesn't propagate, you let that flow through fully, express fully, even direct action if it's skillful, appropriate, but not clinging, not fixating, and not falling back into a kind of polarized subject-object relationship, or the fixation of craving that then proliferates into, oh, but I want. It's just
right. Yeah.
It's just the flow. To be very colloquial.
Yeah, it's refreshing.
If I'm allowed.
Wait, sorry, what did you say?
To be very colloquial, if I'm allowed.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this is what I appreciate about Buddhist modernism, is it feels like it sort of allows for this integration of the best of both worlds, where you take these beautiful ancient practices, many of which obviously precede the Buddha in terms of Indian yogic practices of jhanas and meditation and concentration. But the goal is different. It's not about like cutting oneself off, repressing, trying to leave the world. We kind of weave in this kind of world affirmation, which I feel like in my reading comes up more in the Mahayana tradition and certainly in the Vajrayana tradition. And I feel like now in contemporary Buddhism, I don't, I'm sure there are people out there, but at least in the communities that I practice here in the West, like I never hear anybody say like, well, I'm really just trying hard to get off the wheel of rebirth. That's what I'm trying to do. That's not usually the goal. It's usually about trying to live more fully and show up more fully. And so yeah, I think this approach kind of allows that the use of those practices to fully plug into the sensory realm without it leaving this kind of trace that becomes a distraction or preoccupation or residue. Yeah. I noticed you kind of like, briefly sort of gave a little footnote about like, well, there are certain practices around tantric stuff that are kind of messy. And I can just imagine a lot of listeners being like, ooh, let's double click on that. Let's not like brush that under the rug. I'm curious to hear more about that if you want to share whether your knowledge of traditional practices from the Vajrayana or anything that you've explored, within the scope of what you're willing to share. Because I think people will actually find that very fascinating, folks who are interested in, how do I engage in something like sex and be fully present sensually, and also perhaps having some kind of persistent non-dual experience through that. I think that would be really fascinating to hear, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, so in Vajrayana, the primary practice that uses sex as a vehicle is karma mudra. And there's a good book by Dr. Nida Chengatsang, who's one of the few people publishing in English about the topic, and actually write and speak about it pretty clearly and openly. And there are forms of that practice that are done like literally with a partner, and then also visualized, where you're working with a yidam, like a deity. So, and if you're a monastic practitioner, probably like, although there depends on the lineage, like some monks will transgress their outer vows to engage the practice literally. or some like Tsongkhapa, right, founder of what became the Gelug school, the Dalai Lama's school. He refused to do the literal practices because he wanted to maintain his monastic vows, even if it cost him full liberation in this lifetime. Because in certain tantric interpretations, it's a rapid path. If you want to attain full Buddhahood in one body, you do these sexual yogas, and that blasts out your residual karmic traces through all of your through your embodiment. But he didn't. So there are different approaches to it, whether visualized or literal. And if folks are familiar with Tumo, the kind of inner fire practice, structurally it's quite similar to that. You're harnessing bliss through an intensely embodied experience of bliss, conjoined with a perception of emptiness and non-duality that makes the recognition of non-duality more accessible if it isn't already stabilized, and blasts out habituation. And there are depending on the system, there are more or less elaborate forms, and you might be doing intricate manipulations of energy and different elements of visualization. But that's the size of it.
Got it. And these are things you've personally experimented with, it sounds like?
Not the literal partnered versions.
Okay. Yeah.
And
not yet.
Not yet. But the solo versions can confirm effective.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Yeah.
But I don't know that it's the sole path to full Buddhahood in this lifetime. I don't know that I believe the sectarian claim.
Right. That's another fetish of a very particular practice. The rocket fuel. I mean, that's the thing, you hear that over and over again. It's like X practice is the rocket fuel for enlightenment. And yeah, I think people say that because maybe it was true for them, and for a small subset of other people. But making that claim generally for everybody seems specious to me. I'm curious how you would relate to this. Like my experience with sex and non-duality is that I noticed. I was thinking, is this going to be TMI? But I don't know. I'm just such an open person. I'd rather just share. If people find it offensive, they can click out of the video. But it's interesting. Like I found for myself that I noticed after kind of having some cessations and having this kind of stable, globalized feeling of non-duality, that just sort of resting in this open awareness in that kind of trekcho like sense of Dzogchen, that it felt. Kind of in a way, like sort of what you were describing with Roger, with the Jhanas feeling like a squeezing. I noticed that my habitual way of experiencing something like orgasm, it felt like some kind of uncomfortable, cleaving. It's like I'm going into some kind of interior experience of pleasure and sort of cutting off part of the world. It just doesn't feel like it aligns with. And so noticing that little blip in continuity of the stability of non-dual awareness, I started sort of to make it more an intentional practice. And I would notice during sex, and I still do this, where I really like lock eyes with my wife and like keep my eyes open. I find it's an interesting practice. And throughout like the entirety of the orgasm experience, like my eyes are open and there's a sense of just contacting wide open awareness, throughout that. So it's a different sort of quality of sensation. And I don't think that the eyes open has to be that way, but at least for me, it's an interesting cue, I think, for my mind to like not sort of cleave the world into my own little pleasure retreat away from the rest of my sensory experience. It's like everything just maintains this openness, and like the pleasure like arises as energy within that. But there's sort of like there's not a break in the continuity of non-duality, which is just really interesting. And I actually find it to be a much greater pleasure. I don't know if pleasure is the right word. It's like, it's a much greater fulfillment. The entire experience feels much more complete in that way, like much more symphonic, because it's not needing to cut anything else off. So that's been my own personal experience with that, which I think is really fascinating. I don't know if that relates at all.
Totally resonates.
Yeah.
Totally
Okay.
resonates. Yeah. I mean, the same thing with any sensual pleasure, whether it be sex or like you're doing solo tumo practice and there's intense bliss coming up, or you're doing jhana practice even, or you're doing engaging sexual energy explicitly. The default habitual mode, right, is to kind of clamp down on and like hold to the pleasure and try to like pump it or something, or get more.
Yeah.
In a very kind of graspy way. But I love that you use the word symphonic. Yeah. If you are doing any in this genre of practices that is engaging kind of sensual energy, sexual or otherwise, mixed as a part in a play of the wide open awake field, or as a doorway, right? Because at the moment of orgasm, or at the moment of even sneezing or releasing a stream of urine or coughing, these are like interrupts, where the boundary and the border and the usual self-grasping that we have is interrupted.
Yes. Yeah.
Like a large component of why people seek pleasurable experiences, whether orgasm or food or otherwise, is because in the moment of that pleasure arising, there's less of a sense of separation. There's less of a sense of because there's a bit of a dissolution in the pleasure.
Yeah. It's like a mini jhana spontaneously. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting paradox, isn't it? Because I feel like, in ordinary dualistic perception, the sneeze can feel maybe like a momentary glimpse of non-duality or something like that, because you're just so, I don't know, for a moment you're not consumed with your thought stream or something like that. And I think what the paradox of that is that when, at least for me, like when you then shift how can I say, do that kind of figure ground reversal where now you're sort of operating in this awake awareness context, then the conventional sneeze that used to feel like a relief, like can feel like a squeezing actually. And so it feels like there's some kind of other, I never actually put this into words before. It's really interesting that there's something, what's it like to sneeze? Maybe your eyes are open, maybe your eyes are closed, whatever, but still having contact with that openness. And it feels softer, more symphonic, like more connected, less like just that little clamp. You know what I wonder? This is what I'm wondering actually, as I'm saying this out loud. I wonder if what we're talking about is the difference between like a flow state versus a non-dual state, actually. I remember I once was reading a paper, I don't know if you've come across this paper. It's from maybe like 10 years ago now, but it's by this non-dual researcher, Zoran Jasipovic. And he talks about how in a flow state, the default mode network is like significantly reduced, but there's still this kind of anti-correlation, like seesaw effect between sort of the mind, maybe, going back and forth between default mode network and sort of a task that you're focusing on. At that point, they called it the task positive network. That's kind of a deprecated term now, but there was sort of this seesaw. And so flow state was like, high focus, low default mode network. But he was showing in his research that with a non-dual state, actually these different attentional networks are kind of correlated now. They're no longer anti-correlated. So there's no longer competition between them. I wonder if that's sort of what we're talking about, that maybe in the sort of more more dualistic default frame, something like a sneeze is like a temporary punctuation of the default mode network where it just like, drops for a second. So you feel like, oh, there's relief from selfing. But perhaps it's not yet kind of non-dual, because it feels like the phenomenology of like a non-dual sneeze is actually, or a non-dual orgasm is actually different from a dualistic orgasm, even though they both provide some kind of relief. Like there is a phenomenological like difference there that I definitely picked that up. And I'm curious if maybe that there is a neurological thing happening there that correlates to it.
Oh, I imagine so. And definitely, I mean, I had unitive experiences, like very, very profound feelings of like loss of self world boundary that were not yet actually non-dual, before I had a non-dual glimpse. And like an ordinary experience of orgasm, an ordinary experience of delicious food or getting absorbed in music, it's moving towards that. It's on the spectrum. But there is a really radical stepwise shift. Where the subject-object structure is not instantiated at all. It's not just like softer or blurred or, quite different.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I feel like these natural segues keep appearing because you use the word stepwise, which in my brain I started thinking about in my world of like psychedelic guiding. That refers to a specific kind of technique of working with 5-MeO-DMT in this kind of graduated way. And I did want to. Before I let you go, I feel like I have to bring up the psychedelic side of things, because I know that's also been part of your work, and I know a lot of listeners to this podcast will be fascinated to hear. So yeah, it sounds like you've worked with quite a few things. I mean, we've talked previously about salvia. I know you've blogged about NN-DMT. I know you've worked with 5-MeO-DMT. I would love to hear just a little bit about what your experience has been, and where you see that fitting in the kind of non-dual or awakening pedagogy or path.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think of everything I've tried, and I've tried a lot out of personal curiosity, and sometimes under the cover of, for science, someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
And I'll admit to straightforward hedonism.
Sure, yeah, why not? Yeah.
Of all
that wasn't
of
the
all
salvia,
the
I'm assuming.
No. Although low dose is a blast.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I
quite positively balanced for me. But
yeah, I find it very euphoric, and I feel like I'm very unusual, and I've had to really temper my enthusiasm, because so many of my friends have been like, "Oh my gosh, you have to try salvia; it's so amazing," and they're like, "What the fuck was that? I never want to do that again. It's so unpleasant." It takes a special person to like, I don't know why, but anyway, yeah, it's sort of like cilantro. It feels like some people like cilantro, some people it tastes like soap, and we don't know why, but yeah.
No, different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
Of all the compounds I've tried, 5-MeO in my experience, it seems the most closely allied, vectoring in a similar trajectory to traditional contemplative practice, right? Well, the first time I tried it, I had already had plenty of psychedelic and plenty of meditative experience. I was like, oh, that's what that does. It goes in that direction real fast. Wow. So I think psychedelics within a contemporary pedagogy, and certainly, when people ask me about it, and also how I've negotiated my own use and exploration, is that these are similar to like intense energy techniques, something like Tumo, right? You pretzel yourself up, you hold your breath, you activate energy, maybe some visualization is involved, and you have very intense transitory experiences that are helpful for getting a glimpse, and presumably doing some serious structural and functional reorganization of your neurology. So I could get into more detail, but that's basically how I see the potential of psychedelics, is similar to other technologies of breath holding and attention. This is just another way to induce transient states that make non-dual recognition more accessible, and can do useful psychotherapeutic or energetic work. Like a lot of my own psychological growth and healing has both come through just standard meditation and some talk psychotherapy and friends and life experience, etc. But also a lot has opened up and resolved through psychedelics. In a way that I'm incredibly grateful for, and has made my life much better.
Nice. Yeah, I would definitely relate to that. I remember a long time ago, I did this consultation with Vince Horn, and we were talking about, just sort of like how the word he used for it was, how do you get juice into your practice? And he was saying, if you don't do psychedelics, you need to do the jhanas or just something. I think it's, I don't know, for most people, unless they have a very predisposed neurology to just sort of drop into things, I think doing just sort of dry insight practice is very, very challenging. As the word would suggest, it's dry, and I know for me, like psychedelics, where it just opened up a whole other vistas that I didn't even know were available. And so, it does seem like there has to be some kind of infusion of energy into the system. It does feel like before it's sort of the altered state becomes stabilized as just your default state, you have to experience it as an altered state. And so I do think yeah, psychedelics are like extremely helpful for that. Um, and that makes me curious. Like, as I mean, you're someone who is uh, a teacher. I mean, you are. That's what you do professionally. I mean, you're a coach, right? Helping people along the path. Do you recommend psychedelics to people at different stages? Is that part of, or do you not generally go there?
At this point, I don't make recommendations. People will often talk to me about what they're doing, and I've done plenty of facilitation for friends, etc. But occasionally I'll be like, hey, MDMA, some self-led MDMA psychotherapy really helped me in X way, or someone will ask me about things and I'll speak honestly, but no, I don't usually make recommendations. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's tricky. I mean, there is a sort of liability in that. I mean, that's something I even though I'm a psychedelic guide, I have very strict rules about, what I tell people in terms of what they can do on their own and what I help people access. Because obviously, yeah, it can be dangerous. And yeah, I always tell people to make sure they have a sitter and so forth. And yeah, and there's a sort of motto in a lot of the communities I'm part of in the underground, which is like, start low, go slow. Because yeah, you don't know what you're going to get yourself into.
No. Yeah. I mean, I hope that the legal regime continues to evolve and change.
Yeah, it seems like we're heading that direction. It's been one of the I don't know, I was going to say the few, let me say the only bright spot in the current administration is that there seems to be an openness, I think because of RFK Jr. and just how, I don't know, certain like influencers seem to bend the president's ear very easily, like Joe Rogan, for example, who's very pro psychedelic. So yeah, there's some kind of rallying. I feel like right now that's bipartisan happening, with veterans kind of leading the way with Ibogaine. And I don't know if you heard about just recently, this is a big news story in the psychedelic world that Eli Lilly, the pharmaceutical company, just bought this small 5-MeO-DMT pharmaceutical startup for $2.8 billion.
Oh, damn.
Which is really huge. And obviously there's a lot of complications to that. And people have concerns about big pharma getting involved. And at the same time, it's going to do a lot for mainstreaming and legitimacy. And yeah, I mean, I personally look forward to a healing ecosystem, 5 years from now, where 5-MeO is available, potentially at a ketamine clinic. I don't think that's necessarily the best way to do it. I'd still like to see a lot of practices that are happening in the underground, in terms of the facilitation and the preparation, things like that. So it's not just so medicalized, but yeah, I think it's happening, and I'm excited for it. Yeah.
I think it's just another tool in our repertoire, right? As contemporary practitioners, whether you want to be some kind of weird religious Buddhist like I am, or whatever, these are incredibly powerful agents of psychological and phenomenological and spiritual transformation. And you can choose to keep your distance and go like, the cost benefit analysis doesn't really make sense for me or my community, or I don't want it touching my tradition. Thank you very much. Which fair. And I'm of the opinion that we ought to make use of everything in service of the path.
Yeah,
everything without exception. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, like I don't know. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but like looking ahead, like if you imagine a retreat, let's say you're leading at Nameless Mountain, 5-10 years from now, do you foresee the possibility of maybe there could be a retreat where it's not only the jhanas, the Brahma Viharas, non-dual practices, but maybe there is some weaving in of, I don't know, a low dose 5-MeO-DMT vape pen along the way or something like that? Do you see that possibility?
Yeah, for sure. And that also, when I started to ramble a minute ago, what I wanted to include as well is that, psychedelics alone probably won't do it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Probably goes without saying with whoever's going to be listening to this, whoever stayed around this long, but really interweaving, a classical strength and depth and sophistication of practice with these novel methods, I think you're going to get best results that way.
Oh, absolutely.
And the scaffolding, the scaffolding of some traditional elements can help quite a lot. Set and setting, right? The classic advice, and taking it within a sacramental or a ceremonial context. Not that you always have to do that. That can be quite impactful, and also yoking, even with low dose 5-MeO, where you still have or other substances where you still have some attentional, volitional availability. Doing, unaltered, just doing practices that you would do sober, with the kind of fuel of that exogenous agent can be quite powerful, has been in my experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because in a way we were talking about these as tools used sort of serially, but I think I think meditation is a great preparation for using psychedelics. I think psychedelics combined with meditation, low dose, is incredible. I feel like I got so much mileage out of that in my own practice. For a while, it was mostly just low doses of mushrooms, and then just sit and meditate for a couple hours, and it would just I used to do sort of like the Goyenka body scan and stuff like that. And then I started taking mushrooms and was like, oh, I could do a body scan, or I could do a no body scan where the body is like dissolving and disappearing. And there's no center to awareness that's doing the noticing. And that just like opened all that up so clearly. And I don't think I personally could have gotten there without some plant medicine help. So I'm a big fan. Good stuff. All right. Well, I think those are all the things that we had emailed about in terms of, I don't know if there's anything else you feel like is left unsaid, or some topic that you're jazzed about that you want to conclude with. Do you think we've covered it?
I think we've pretty much covered it. I really encourage everyone listening, take initiative and use all of the tools that are available to you, traditional and modern, in your pursuit of healing and freedom. Do so responsibly, be well informed, get helpful guides along the way are wonderful support. Also going to put in a word for traditional monastic training. It's very good.
Yeah.
You want to do a little bit of that, can be quite good. But the field's open, there's no, we're in an era of experimentation and change, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, I want to make sure people know where to find you. So I can certainly put your website, your YouTube channel in the show notes, but I don't know if there's anything else that you want to name or promote as we're closing here, that you might want to let people know about.
No, just the website and the YouTube channel, and the retreat I'm leading in November. That's all I've got to promote at present. I'm writing a book, but that will probably get released by the end of the year. We'll see.
Oh, cool. That's exciting. Yeah. Are you going to self-publish that, or are you trying to go through it? Nice.
No, I'm not going to go through traditional publishing channels. I'm just going to put it out there for free.
That's
people
very
read
generous.
it, they can.
I love that. Cool. All right. We'll look forward to that. Well, I'll definitely put all that in the notes for folks. Well, this has been great. Thank you again. Yeah, so much for being my first guest. I appreciate you coming on here. And I love this conversation. We've gone all over the map. And I think these are a lot of the topics that our listeners will be really interested to hear more about. So I'm glad that we covered so much ground and went as eclectic as I knew we would with you on. That's why I chose you, because I knew we'd get into a lot of different interesting things. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your time there in New York.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider liking and subscribing. Consider also giving it a 5-star rating on wherever you get your podcasts. That's really helpful to allow it to reach more people. And if you're interested in connecting with me for any kind of work that we could do together, you can go to my website. That is unjourneying.com. And there you'll find opportunities to meet up with me for coaching, for psychedelic retreats. And also, if you're interested in joining an ongoing community conversation with other like-minded people about these topics, you can consider joining my Patreon community. And you'll find that at unjourneying.com/Patreon. And there you'll find different access points, everything from a text thread to regular Zoom meetups where we get together and talk about these things. So thank you again, and I hope to be in conversation with you soon.